Welcome to The Access. I'm your host, Hayvi Bouzo. For the first part of this episode, we'll be discussing the U.S. government's decision to designate the IRGC as a terrorist organization and the recent policy to end the Iranian oil sanctions waivers. To talk about this, we are joined by Mr. Brian Hook, U.S. Special Representative for Iran. Thank you so much for having us once again, Special Representative Brian Hook.
Good to see you.
I want to start immediately by the waiver that was actually removed by the United States, especially the State Department, for the sanctions against the Iranian regime. Tell us a little bit more about this. What does that mean? What's the direct impact over this change in policy?
Yeah, the direct impact is Iran will have less revenue to spend in Syria and in Lebanon and in Iraq and in Yemen and in Bahrain and with Hamas. Most of this the Iranian regime's revenue, its chief source of revenue, are its oil exports. They export about 2.5 million barrels of oil a day, okay, roughly. We have taken off 1.5 million barrels of Iranian crude oil from their exports. There's only 1 million barrels left. On Monday, Secretary Pompeo announced there will be no more imports of Iranian crude oil anywhere in the world. And this is good news for people in the Middle East who are tired of Iranian regional aggression.
But what about countries like China and India and Turkey who still are trying or maybe willing to continue try to violate or overpass these sanctions? Is there going to be any arrangements to stop these countries from trading oil with Iran?
We have not seen any evidence that China or India want to continue importing Iranian crude oil after May 2nd. They're currently under a waiver that expires on May 2nd. The Secretary's announcement on Monday ends the United States giving out any oil waivers. Now, if you are a country that was importing Iranian crude oil, you have a choice. After May 2nd, you can either do business in the United States and with the United States and have access to the global financial system, or you can import Iranian crude oil. But you cannot do both. Any country of any size, any country in the world is going to choose working with the United States over importing Iranian crude oil. Iran's crude oil is not exotic. It's not hard to find substitute grades of crude oil to meet your energy needs. And so we have a well-supplied oil market. Any nation that wants oil can get it. They just can't get it from Iran anymore.
Why didn't you mention Turkey? Are you certain about Turkey's position after this? Because we know that Turkey was not happy with many of the decisions that came out recently by the State Department, including selecting the IRGC as a terrorist organization.
Right. We understand when nations decide that they want to announce that they don't like a foreign policy decision of the United States, but that's very different than violating American sanctions or risking violating American sanctions. Turkey is an ally of the United States. They're a member of NATO. And it's in Turkey's interest to maintain those kinds of relations. It's just not worth it. Turkey imports a very small amount of crude oil from Iran. We have also increased production in Iraq, specifically in Kirkuk. So it's very easy for Turkey to move from Iranian crude oil to Iraqi oil, and it's very easy to do that. And so we don't see Turkey having any problem. Turkey is a very sophisticated country when it comes to oil. They're able to get the oil that they need. It's just not in Turkey's interest, we think, after May 2nd to continue importing Iranian crude oil.
Also, I want to touch base on the IRGC being designated right now as a terrorist organization by the United States. What do you think the impact would be on the Iranian regime now that their entire army is designated a terrorist organization?
Yeah, it was a good thing when the United States sort of just recognized what is realistic. The reality on the ground is that the IRGC and its Quds Force is a terrorist organization under the statutory definition that Congress gave us. And so the IRGC oppresses the Iranian people at home, and the Quds Force exports the revolution in the Middle East. And it was a long overdue decision. It is the first time the United States has ever designated a wing of a government as a terrorist organization. But Iran likes to use its government as a terrorist organization and hope that nobody sanctions it. And so we're just not going to play that game anymore.
Does that mean that some of their leaders might be arrested and maybe sent to the United States or other countries to be put on trial for what they've committed in these countries?
Yes, the IRGC statute, I'm sorry, the Foreign Terrorist Organization statute provides for criminal prosecution if you provide material support to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And there's also restrictions, visa restrictions coming in. And so it does give us new tools to deter IRGC and disrupt their operations. We are trying to paint a black cloud over the IRGC and the Quds Force. The IRGC controls up to half of Iran's economy. They use the revenue from that to fund their operations overseas. They also use the operations to oppress Iranians at home. And so we are trying to make radioactive those sectors of the economy that the IRGC controls.
Very quickly, I also want to go back to what's happening in terms of the Hormuz. There is a dispute. The United States and Iran is also trying to threaten the United States, but Rouhani is giving different language, different statements, unlike the Ayatollah, the regime, the hardcore of the regime itself. Do you believe in those different, like, what is the regime trying to do today by sending these different messages, and what is the United States prepared to do in terms of these, to confront these threats by the Iranian regime against the United States?
Well, you ask a number of very good questions. The first one I'd say is that the only people that count in the regime are hardliners. The supreme leader is in charge. Qasem Soleimani, General Soleimani, the head of the Revolutionary Guard, he's very powerful. Their foreign ministry is not powerful. And so we pay a lot of attention to what Qasem Soleimani does, more than what Foreign Minister Zarif says. Iran regularly threatens to close the Strait of Hormuz. I have a document in my office that has all of the dates that Iran has threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz. They're empty threats. The Strait of Hormuz is international waters, and the United States military will sail and operate wherever international law allows, and we will protect all international waters.
Quickly, in the end, I want to touch base on the Hezbollah situation. Also, there was now a reward that was offered by the United States for whoever gives out information on their financial activities. We know that this activity actually stretches from South America all the way across. What does that mean for Hezbollah and other influential militias, funded and supported by the Iranian regime, like in Iraq? So, is that new strategy? What are we going to be seeing other than the reward itself? What are the direct implications for a militia, a terrorist militia like Hezbollah?
We are trying to drive up the costs of Hezbollah operating with impunity. If you look at Hezbollah's funding over 40 years, 70% of Hezbollah's budget comes from Tehran. That's $700 million a year. For the first time in Hezbollah's history, the leader of Hezbollah in March had to make a public appeal for donations. They don't have as much money as they used to. Why? Because American sanctions are working. And we're going to keep at this and dry up the revenue that Iran needs to run its foreign policy around the Middle East. And we're already seeing very early signs of success.
I have a lot more questions to ask you, but I know you have a very tight schedule today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. Very good questions.
Yes, having us today again.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.